My name is Rogerio. I'm the CTO and co-founder of LangWatch. Lovely to be here with you today. And I'm accompanied by my friend, Ron Kremer. If you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Ron. I'm a senior consultant at ADC Amsterdam Data Collective, where we focus on deploying AI. And at the same time, I'm doing my PhD at the University of Amsterdam, focusing on AI safety, alignment, and interpretability.
Perfect. Yeah. Ron and I met through this common topic, exactly, right? The passion for AI, safety AI evaluation, AI quality. How do we control this thing, which there's obviously a lot of intelligence, but it seems uncontrollable. So yeah, how are we managing to go about it? And a little bit on LangWatch first. LangWatch is a platform for the complete operations for your production AI. So LangWatch is an LLM ops platform that help you build, evaluate, deploy, monitor, and optimize your AI agents. Everything you need from prompt management, from traces, from annotations, evaluations, which we're going to talk a lot about here. It's all there on the platform for your team to help your team operate and iterate faster and safer on those agents.
Yeah, and a little bit, just two sentences about ADC. So as I already mentioned, we're a data and AI consultancy, and our clients are the who's who of the Dutch economy, right? So we're working across different sectors and deploying AI in a reliable fashion. So we're also looking for positions. So if you're working in AI and you're excited to join a quickly growing and intelligent team, then feel free to drop me a message.
For sure. Yeah, highly recommend it. And then, as we're going to see today, we're going to talk a little bit about agent simulations. This is the little animation that you can see here on screen on the LangWatch platform, all those conversations being ran automatically against your agent and which are passing, which are failing. And we're going to touch on that a bit more on the collaboration as well that LangWatch can provide to you as a platform for testing your agents, having the PMs and the domain expert writing those scenarios, having the devs iterating, make sure of the quality, and the business seeing all those insights. But how is it going to work, this webinar? What is the goal for it? The goal is to demystify agent evaluations, showing why just the pairwise simple input-output LLM evaluation is not enough, or why just having the devs doing is not enough, right? How we're seeing business tackling it, teams, and the strategies that they go about it. And the way it's going to work is kind of a fireside chat style. We have some questions that we collected that is like the most asked questions when we interact with our customers from our own experience, right? And then me and Ron are going to debate over each questions. We're going to give our views on it. And we ask you to please drop any comments or any questions in the chat box. In the meantime, feel free to jump in so then we can tackle as part of it. But we also going to have 10 minutes at the end to spare. We're going to try to go about 3 minutes per question. And shall we start it, Ron?
Yeah, go ahead. Let's jump into it.
All right, let's go. So first big question, why are AI evaluations becoming more important right now?
Well, I think this is definitely an interesting trend that we've seen in 2025 that more and more teams are starting to slow down a little bit and cool off from the AI hype that we've seen, in the last 3 years, and starting to think about how can they iterate and optimize their processes better. And evaluation is at the centerpiece of this, right? In a constantly changing environment, with new data, new users, new models being released almost every week, and changing prompts all the time. How do you make sure that you iterate properly? Well, in my opinion, one way to do that is to measure, measure, measure every single time.
Right.
And evaluation is at the heart of that.
Right. You have actually a graph explaining here, right? Do you want to go over
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, sure. So we can go over this. So not only is the environment changing all the time, right, with new data and new users, as I mentioned, but also what we see nowadays is that within an organization, there are oftentimes more than one use case of AI running at the same time. So you can have
Absolutely.
a code assistant and a chatbot, and even more recently, agentic workflows are starting to pop up. And if you don't have some kind of evaluation strategy already in place, then you're probably, reusing a lot of things and wasting effort on duplicate tasks.
Right.
So
And I'd say it's I wanted to touch on that on the various use case. Two things come to mind. So first is not even first of all for those various use cases. One of the reasons I think evaluations have become so important is that this is something like AI is so smart right now, it's so powerful right now that they're doing things that go beyond the knowledge of a developer, of a common engineer, right? So if you're working on a medical field, for example, the developer cannot know what's the correct medical doctor answer for that, right? So they are working on the engineering side, but a bit blind. They have to collaborate with the domain expert of the area. And even if it's something like customer support, you don't necessarily know what are the rules of the customer support for that company, right? Or like how they should behave. You need someone experienced going together there. So I think evaluation became a big thing, a bit above traditional software testing, also because of this element, right? And on the duplication, I also wanted to add something. There's not just duplication across the projects, like you're saying, but across the same project, right? Because you test something manually and then the model change, right? You need
yeah,
to send a message again to the agent, and then like people, the way industry is working, like they're sending message by hand, and then another one, and another one, and another one, and that's a lot. And then you change things, you're afraid things will break. You do it
yeah.
all over again, right? So that's a lot of duplicated and wasted effort too.
I think that's a good point. And additionally, as your project grows, right, as you go from some kind of proof of concept into pre-production and finally deploy it to users, the needs of your project will also change. So you've
Right.
got this very complex environment that you need to keep track of. And I feel like this is where a lot of companies and a lot of teams actually lose grip over their evaluations is because they start to think about all these dimensions that they need to consider, and and it just becomes overwhelming, of course. And so you set up some kind of expectation of how your project is supposed to go, but then reality hits and you realize that, your tests may be passing, but your users are unhappy.
Yeah.
And the worst part, and this is something that I've seen all over, is engineers who are iterating purely on intuition. And I'm sure you've seen this as well, right? Like
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
prompt changes based on gut feeling, model changes based on some kind of, finger in the air. So yeah,
Right.
hopefully this is something we can tackle with a solid evaluation strategy.
Yeah, for sure. Because we do want to go to the real world, right? It's very challenging. It's very different, your intuition from the real world. That's why you need to go there early. But at the same time, people are afraid. So yeah, talking about being overwhelming, as you mentioned, the evaluation needs and frameworks keep rapidly changing from MLOps to LLMOps to AgentOps. What are we trying to achieve?
Oof, that's one hell of a question. Yeah, I think first of all, it's important to point out that um, we're not solving anything new, right? It may feel like with all of these new models coming out, it's like we're reinventing the fire every single time. But on the other hand, there are new nuances that are being introduced every single time something new is released. So, what are we trying to achieve? Well, I think that starting all the way with DevOps, right? There were three very clear goals. Goal number one, in my opinion, is reliability and quality, right? So you want to make sure that we start off with statistical models, but then we had language models, and now we have agents. We want the output to be consistent. If the input is similar, the output should be similar as well. And we want it to be of a measurable high quality, right? So we start off with metrics like accuracy and precision, but with language models, you start measuring things like hallucination rates, refusal,
Right.
right? Things like that. With agents, you have to measure tool usage and whether they actually succeed in the task that you set them, right? The second point that I think we're trying to achieve with all of these ops frameworks is debuggability, right? I think that's one thing that every engineer probably encountered at some point is that you start working on a prototype and something else is added, a new feature is developed, And then eventually you have this completely unmaintainable code base and zero version control. So something changes, something breaks, and you have nothing to go back to, right? So LLM ops and agent ops build on these principles. You can
Right.
version your models, you can version your prompts, you can version
Right.
your data sets, and build something that you can actually iterate consistently on. Now, the
Yeah.
third point uh, is safety, right? Uh, with MLOps, it was a bit simpler because, well, I say simpler, right? It was different.
Yeah, it depends on
Yeah, yeah, it
on
really
the
depends.
person.
I think that with MLOps, our main safety and security concern was infrastructure, right? Like role-based access control and making sure that we had good supply chain hygiene, right? So that our
Right.
data, the whole
Right.
pipeline was
Clean
secure.
data.
But with language models, now on top of all of this, we also have to worry about model behavior, right? Jailbreaking and prompt injections. We have to worry about PI data leakages. We have to worry about tone consistency. Like we don't want our model to go and tell our users, something they don't want to
Exactly.
hear.
Exactly. So I think that's it, right? Like that's the scope increase as well. And I'd say like if you think about low-level languages and high-level languages, you can see the same movement here. So from MLOps to LLM ops to agent ops, if you think about it, like as things are getting more and more powerful and doing more, then of course you also have more security risks, right? Like if with great powers comes great responsibility, right? But also, if you think about the people that were involved there on ML Ops, it's a very technical, let's say, very technical trade, right? It's very deep statistics, and then you're talking really about the models and then training there on those weights. Then a level higher than that, LLM Ops, you are doing RAG, right? And then you have metrics that are less deeply technical, let's say, than MLs, but you still have like F1 and accuracy scores, right? To know the score of your RAG. But now we're talking about agents, and now it's closer and closer to, let's say, the human being and the way you look at it as well. So you're talking to an agent, and you want to see if it executes the right tasks. You want to see if it's using the right tools, but actually at the end doesn't really matter the order of the tools and so on. It matters that it achieved the goal at the end, right? So more and more it's getting more on this, let's say, less technical, numerical, statistical part, and more natural language, right? And more human language, including images, including all that. And I think that's also what that's why this tools evolved. That's why we need an agent ops, even though we already had ML ops, right? They fit totally different yeah,
I just,
also
you know,
levels, I'd
I
say.
just, I just want to mention here that I've personally experienced some pushback and some skepticism about the whole concept of agent ops, especially
Okay.
from like these old school machine learning engineers who are,
Right.
oh, come on, guys, you just came up with LLM ops. Why do you keep trying to come up with something new? But the truth is, and if you look at the industry, the needs are really changing, and the
Exactly.
the practices that we had with MLOps no longer cover the entire area that we want them to encompass, right? So the
Yeah.
evaluations we had set up are no longer enough because we're evaluating more high level, less deterministic uh, mechanisms, essentially. So yeah, it's
Exactly. Exactly.
fascinating time.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we can talk about those all day, but let's move on. We still have a lot of interesting questions to cover. Like this one, why is it important to have an evaluation strategy in your team? How are strategy and using the right tools complementary I think you have a great view on that, Ron.
Yeah, I think this is definitely my area of expertise, right? I think if you're the more technical stakeholder, then as a consultant, I have to talk about strategy a lot more often. Um, And what we see is that it's necessary to give you an initial direction, right? To a general idea of what you want to accomplish. So we've seen teams that say we don't need strategy. We're just gonna look at what our current problems are. We're gonna find the best tool for that, and we're gonna just go like this with a very short, like near-term view, right? But the thing is that a lot of these things become redundant fairly quickly. And as the field evolves, right? Half a year ago, or maybe okay, a year ago, not many people could predict that agents would become such a big thing. And now we have entire startup ecosystems trying to build the infrastructure for it. So essentially, strategy is it's this it gives you this long-term view, right? If we go back to anticipating your project needs, then strategy is exactly that. It's something that allows you to build your expectations in a more constructive way, right? And prepare better in advance.
Yeah,
So
I
I'd
think at
say,
the beginning in 2020, yeah, sorry to interrupt, but there was this frenzy, this hype, right? LLMs and building agents. But we are maturing now, right? The industry is maturing. And now we have agents that have been in production for a while, for months, for years, right? And
no.
then, but people are still like working a bit disorganized and chaotic. And like without it is already time. We are mature enough that we should have a strategy, right? We should have a plan. Otherwise, you get actually moves lower, right? Otherwise, you move, yeah, things keep breaking. You keep having regressions. You keep testing everything manually, and people don't trust it anymore.
Yeah. And especially evaluation strategy. Like we see in our field that a lot of times evaluation is very much an afterthought. So teams come up with this brilliant business idea, right? And then you have this very, very intense push. Maybe it's from investors, maybe it's from upper management, but you need to deploy something quickly, right? And
Right.
evaluation immediately takes a back seat, right? You're worried about pushing the next feature, then you're rushing to push to production, right? And then the same way I've worked in cybersecurity for a little while, a few years ago, and I've seen the same approach, right? Where
Yeah.
companies really start investing in cybersecurity only after an incident. So the same thing with evaluation. You start investing in evaluation only after your model starts regressing, or if you start investing and thinking about evaluation when you already have real users complaining, that's already too late. That means you've already done something wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now you're gonna have to it's still time to you still can build evaluation on top, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's gonna take you a lot more effort now, and you're gonna lose on a lot of the knowledge and value you could have accumulated throughout the entire project. So now it's
And
gonna be like this add-on sticked on top.
that's true. That's true. So evaluation can really help you reduce this risk. But I also like thinking like, how can I use evaluation to leverage me to go faster actually? And it can really do that. Because if you have all those cases defined, it makes it so easy for you to tinker with your model, right? You just switch model, you just change the prompt. And then if you have this automated, then you can even have another agent to try to improve your agent. So
Mm.
actually, people put it on the back seat, but it could make you go faster. Just think about how that implementing on your team, and you find ways that actually push you faster.
Yeah.
Um, but then, who should own the evaluation process in a company? This is an interesting one. I like this one because that's a lot on what we say already, right? And connecting back to what I said, we are now building things with computers we never imagined possible, right? It's entering in domains in the legal domain, in the medical domain, into the more, let's say, creative workers domain. And you can no longer afford to have just the engineers, just the developers being the full owners of it. And they don't want it anyway, right? Because they are doing a lot. There's a lot of push. There's a lot of features to be built. There's a lot of things to be optimized there. And then, of course, the developer can optimize the latency. They can optimize the RAG. But to get this trust from the business to get this green light, there's a lot of questions on how do I know my agent is good enough, right? People build this trust once they use it themselves, once they see it themselves. So bring these people, the PMs, the domain experts, the stakeholders to be part of this building process. So in my opinion, who should own the evaluation process is the team, right? Is the whole team. Is not one row or the other row, but it's the collaboration between PM, between domain expert and the dev. And this is what we've seen the most effective teams going on and working on. It's really a full building team ownership.
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree with you, right? That it's definitely a collaborative process. And teams that assume that engineers should own the entire evaluation pipeline, well, their evals are usually stuck in the technical side, right? And they miss a lot of actual business metrics that you should be tracking, right? If you're in the end, if you're building an AI application within a company, then the goal is very closely tied to revenue. You should be either generating some kind of income or you should be saving a cost. And that should be a measurable outcome. And I feel like a lot of teams, a lot of organizations even miss out on this idea and they think that AI will just somehow magically generate these numbers themselves, right? But that's why you have to have business stakeholders involved in the process of evaluation. That's why you have to have domain experts that help you calibrate, right?
I think you had a graph for that. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so we like this really ties into a lot of the things that I spoke about. But in order to make this easier for our clients, we came up with the idea of the three levels of complexity of evaluation, right? So in every single organization, you have multiple AI applications. That's our Z-axis, right? And then you need to consider what will your project's evaluation needs be at every layer of the organization and at every stage of the project. So, to make this a little more convenient and less complex, we split these clearly into engineers, domain experts, and managers, and the project stages into the initial stage, which is POC, pilot stage, where you deploy to your beta users, and production, where you're already like fully there, right? So yeah,
Because the concerns also evolve over time, right? So what you're looking at POC, then you start getting your first beta results. You probably have some other worries, like the thing is working and it's running, but then you find some early bugs, and then you go to real life, you realize it's a whole different thing, and you look at the business metrics at the end of the day, right? You need to evolve to that direction, like you said.
but yeah, so that's why it's important to start early because a lot of the things that you build in your POC will still be relevant while when you're already in production, right? And the thing is uh, that you don't want to start measuring SLAs too early in the process, right? But for example, latency or time to first token, it's going to be relevant very quickly and it's going to stay relevant throughout the entire process. So yeah, maybe we can show an example of a real world use case of yeah. So here's just one example on a use case that I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. It's just a regular HR chatbot, right? This is a user-facing conversational assistant, and it has access to some kind of internal knowledge base with some HR-specific documents, right? And the purpose of this is to provide assistance with HR-related queries like how many holiday days do I have available? What's going to be my bonus this year? And so on. So we sat down with the team and the organization. I'm going to keep them anonymous. And we started going layer by layer. We started in the bottom left corner with the engineers. What is the first priority that the engineers will want to concern themselves with? And so you set up some basic technical metrics, latency, some kind of baseline test accuracy on a golden data set, some initial error rates, right? And then you see that as the project grows, so do the evaluation metrics. We start measuring system throughput once we get to the actual first beta users. We start measuring token usage because we want to make sure that the whole system is actually profitable, right, and doesn't cost too much. And since this is RAG based, we also want to measure retrieval precision. Finally, once we deploy to production to all of our users, we start measuring availability because we have some kind of SLAs that we have to meet, right? So what kind of uptime do we have? What is the cost per query at scale? And then also at this stage, we already have enough of an audience to start A/B testing prompts on different segments and see how they work.
Yeah.
Now, yeah, please interrupt me if you have any questions, but I'm
Yeah.
just going to go through these. Uh, the next thing that we filled in for this client was for the domain experts. Now, in this case, the domain experts were actual people, right? These were HR employees that answer these questions manually for the last 10 years of their life. So they helped us together with the engineers, right? Collaboration here. They set up the first eval data set, right? So they essentially curated the first samples of like question, correct answer, question, correct answer. And they also helped us tune our prompts to make sure that our model is HR policy compliant, right? So that it matches the tone of the responses that we want. Anyways, fast forwarding a little, by the time we got to production, we start measuring NPS scores and customer satisfaction, right, with a simple thumbs up, thumbs down. And so that's the soft metrics, right? That's the tone correctness, that's the groundedness that we're talking about here. And then managers are managers, right? They worry about business. So from the very start, our manager was responsible for managing team productivity and giving us our initial feedback before we even went to beta users. But once we actually started deploying to actual users, we started measuring our adoption velocity. And eventually, the managers collaborated with the domain experts in order to establish some kind of ROI, right? And this is what I was talking about, that there needs to be some kind of business tie-in for this. The way we established this in this case was we literally asked the HR analysts, how much time do you think this task is going to take you? And then we counted how many of those tickets did the chatbot solve on its own without escalating to a person. We count up that time, multiply it by the hourly rate, and there you go. You have some kind of savings rate off the top of your head.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, thank you. I really liked, Ron, when you showed me for the first time, because it really matches also with the journey we've been through LangWatch, right? And helping multiple companies. And that's how we really see clearly here how the industry evolved as well. So we started with traces and measuring all those metrics for the agents, right? And then RAG was a big thing in 2024. And then we added all the collaborative evaluation data set and annotations and prompt management and so on, the platform. And then evolving together as the industry evolved. And now we are already talking about ROI measurement and the collaboration, the scenario evaluation, escalation, quality, and so on. Yeah, so it's a really comprehensive framework there. And then we really notice the value of this really summarizes the big value of the collaboration as well between those different stakeholders, right?
Yeah.
All right. It's all very exciting topic, so I think I need to move a bit faster on the questions here. So now we're already start talking. I think that's the last category of questions, framework and tooling. And the first question we have here is, what are agent simulations and how is it different from LLM Evals?
I
Yeah.
think this is your expertise, right? So I'm curious to hear what you have to say on the subject because when I first saw, so this is by the way how we met. I just reached out to Manuk and Rogerio and I said, "Hey guys, I'm really impressed by what you built at LangWatch. Let's have a chat." And the simulations was what really caught my eye. So just to give the audience a little bit of background, right? We were building an agentic workflow for a client of ours. And we noticed that we were testing the components individually, right? The sub-agents and the tools. And we had unit tests, and we also had some kind of golden data set, and we were measuring the input-output accuracy as you would, right? But then we realized that agents are a little different, right? They have memory, they have persistence, they're stateful. So it's not enough to just measure the input and the output. So that's where I found LangWatch's simulations to be most useful because they allow you, and I'm sorry, I'm taking your
No, no,
spotlight,
yeah, it's perfect.
uh, but yeah, the thing is that they allow you, they filled this very important niche for us of measuring long context like situations, right? Like real world interactions. How does our agent perform, not just in an input output scenario, but input output, actual multi-turn conversation, right? And yeah, so it's definitely been a very useful addition to our toolbox, I have to say.
Thank you, Ron. That was a perfect explanation, so I don't need to present anymore. But I'll give you an image that we like this image because it's very cute and all. But it represents how does a agent simulation work, right? We call our framework is called Scenario. So it is a framework that you can write either via code to give the engineers, the developers, the power to write those scenarios like they would with end-to-end tests, with unit tests. or via the platform on agent simulations on LangWatch, like Ron was explaining. And it works basically by putting agent, which is here represented by this robot, a user simulator agent, someone pretending to be a user. You can see that it's clearly a robot, but it's saying it's a user. And then it talks to your agent, represented here by this frog. So this user simulator agent will pretend to be a user in a certain situation. So for example, you're testing the refund flow, right? So the situation is there is a customer, they purchase a product and they're very angry right now, very mad about it, and they're calling your customer support to get their money back, right? And they go through many turns and so on. The agent asks for more information, the order number, and so on. And then they go back and forth. And then as they two talk to each other, there is a third agent, which here is represented by you, watching this whole simulation here, and then judging it if your agent did the right thing based on your specified business criteria. So on your business criteria, you should maybe try to solve the client request at first, give specific next steps. And then if they push back again, then maybe one of your rules is that they should immediately escalate to a human agent, right? And this situation, we call it exactly scenario. So this is one scenario for your agent to be simulated and to go in multi-turn. Your goal is to have many scenarios, right? So you create all those scenarios, which you can then generate all these conversations, all the simulations, which will then be judged, and also you can read it through, giving you a lot of confidence that things are working. And at the end, it looks more or less like this. You see all those reds and greens. All those are conversations that we are running real time, right? So you have like 20 conversations. Instead of you sending the messages by hand, you can just rerun them every time you do a tiny change. So then doing changes becomes cheap, crazy cheap, right? If you want to change your prompt, just change it. If you want to change your model, just change it. You can run the simulations again because you can trust it to give you confidence. And moreover, because it's readable, right? It's not a number. It's not like an F1 score. It's not a how'd say an arcane number that not everyone will understand. You can have the domain experts, you can have the PM, non-technical stakeholders also here.
I just noticed that you made the simulations multimodal. Was that some kind of Christmas update that I missed?
Actually, we have that for longer. So since November, if I'm not mistaken, so before Christmas. However, there is a lot more going on, especially around voice, especially about scenario altering on the platform. Very soon we have big updates for end of January. So yeah, stay tuned.
Okay, that's something to look forward to, huh?
Absolutely. And that segues into what is the agent test pyramid and how does it apply to the LLM system? Because I wanted to touch on something that you said, Rom, that you first had your golden data set, right? Your input and your output of all data set.
Yeah.
Actually, those are still very valuable. So even though I show the simulations and these scenarios, if you think about an agent is not like one entity that does everything. An agent uses tools, right? And maybe sub-agents and so on. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes. And those parts, so if you have an agent that orchestrates customer support, but then sometimes it has to answer questions, right? These questions comes from a knowledge base. So it's a reg, right? It's again a reg. You want to measure a reg as a reg. You don't want to go and have just scenarios for the reg because you can have 2,000 items of knowledge base, right? So you still want to know the accuracy, the F1 score, and so on. So those evaluations, they are still key for all those smaller parts of the agent, let's say, which are still input and output, right? Yeah. Which are essential. They're basically the tools that the agent is going to use. So we view them as same parts of a whole as your whole testing strategy, your whole, or how we call it, test pyramid. Why test pyramid? Because we see it as the smaller parts going to the bigger part, and the more that you should have to the less you should have. So at the very bottom, you have traditional software testing, right? You have unit test, the deterministic stuff, you should know that your code works at the very least, right?
Yeah.
Then on top of that, you have the non-deterministic parts. So when you ask a question and you do a reg, each time that you send is a bit different. So this is a bit similar to the machine learning work where you have a data set with 100 examples, you measure accuracy and you're trying to maximize for that, right? But then as you maximize the reg, as you maximize the document parsing pipeline, the classification pipeline, and so on, you still want to know that everything works together. You still want to know that your agent orchestrating those tools can do a great job and for many turns and in many directions in many more open simulated situations. And that's where the simulations enter.
If I can add here, just a lucky coincidence, but I was applying to a program called MATS. It's the Machine Learning Alignment and Safety Forum. It's a research program, and I was looking through what are their top priorities right now, and what is AI, safety research in 2026 going to look like. And I was very surprised to see that they follow very similar principles in academia as they do in industry, right? So this is very much state of the art stuff. Um, we are going to like, so for example, one of the top priorities in AI safety is chain of thought monitorability, right? So being able to monitor and identify any kind of deceptive behavior in a model in its chain of thought. And
Right.
the way we do this is not by, setting up some kind of hard evaluations or unit tests, but by simulating thousands and thousands of conversations and seeing in how many of those does it fail, how many of those is it misaligned, how many of those are biased, and actually dangerous conversations. And then how can we tweak it based on that? But simulations, and more importantly, I think in this whole thing, language model judges are going to play an enormous role. So if we go back to your description of or your image of that little frog and robot, right? The LLM as a judge, I think, plays a very, very important role here because that's the actual evaluator. Our evaluators
Absolutely.
are becoming stochastic themselves, right? So they're not deterministic anymore. And there's a lot of skepticism about this. Like I've discussed this with my colleagues as well. I know I'm going a bit off topic here, but bear with me.
All right.
The LLM judges are a big kind of point of debate in our industry, right? Are they to be
Yeah.
trusted? Are they reliable, right? How do you actually, but they're cheap. They're very cheap. They're very scalable. They're very fast comparatively to, the human effort that it would take to do the same thing. So I see a lot of effort this year is going to go into aligning and calibrating and stabilizing LLM judges so that
Yeah.
they can be even more reliable and maybe even use small language models, right? So for these very, very niche like classification tasks, maybe fine-tuning a small language model is finally going to be viable and it's going to be cheaper, it's going to be faster than using an all-purpose LLM for
Right. Right.
these judgment tasks. So I think,
I have a consideration that so we get that a lot, right? As you can imagine. So we have simulations on our platform and we get this skepticism a lot. So
yeah,
indeed, like you're saying, last year, this was like maybe one of our main time spent was indeed on aligning the judge.
yeah,
So we defined it for scenario for ourselves, right? As we were using and then for customers that the judge needs to be the most awesome thing there. And then over the months since we released that, there was already a lot of learnings that we embedded there. But I also get the question of cost. And I actually think even if you use the smartest GPT 5.2 with or Claude Opus with UltraThink, right? It's still cheaper, like I say, than human. And also considering if you're doing those pre-prod, then you're paying the cost once, right? It's not like if you have a million messages in production, what is like $5, right? To be sure that in production it won't break. It's actually crazy cheap.
yeah,
So you can try to leverage intelligence, but indeed, the only person that knows what your agent should do based on your business is yourself.
yeah,
So we talk a lot, like on our work with onboarding with clients, we also work together to make sure that this is a bit of iterative process, right? There are some promises there that like we're going to just test your agent and we're going to prove everything works, but we don't know. Like you are the best person to know, yeah, how your agent should behave. So there's also, that's why again I go back to the collaborative part and the team participating on it. And then once you manage to tune this agent, this judge, then it scales, right? And then you can keep iterating.
I wanted to ask, I wonder, so the calibration of the judge makes sense, right? But do you do any kind of aggregation of, so for consistency's sake? Because one thing that I noticed working with LLM judges is that if you don't aggregate, so for example, prompt the same model multiple times and then take the whatever statistical aggregate you want, like maximum or median,
Yeah,
or what's becoming even more popular right now is like LLM Council, right? Where you aggregate over several
right,
models
right, right.
because each model has its own unique bias.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, sorry, Ron, because we need to move forward. But I
yeah,
will
yeah, yeah.
answer.
Let's
I'll
go.
answer that just really quick. The approach that we've seen, the simplest approach is to pass at n and pass to the n, right?
Yeah.
So depending on the situation, people run it like 5 times and then at least one of them should run, and I'm satisfied with that. But
Mhm.
for some others that want more reliability, they can do like I run 5 times and I wanted to pass in all five. So I'm really sure that even in 5 different simulations or 10 or whatever n,
It's
then
consistent.
you can trust. But yeah, some we found out that yeah, introducing some loop, it really helps on the on tackling the variance.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it's connected to this, but how do you measure when your evals are good enough to ship them?
Yeah, so going back to the whole debate of like at which point should you introduce evals and how they should change across your project, I think this good enough should also change, right? So when you're just getting, it should make sense as in you don't want to waste too much time building evals, right? Because there's this very good saying, I think it was Toyota executives who came up with it, but essentially it goes, the value is made where when the metal gets bent, right? So essentially
Right.
you still have to put in the work and evaluations are not the main value bringer. So
Yeah.
make sure that your evaluations like this good enough is very well defined. Like you shouldn't spend half of your time developing evals. You should spend maybe 10%, uh, and especially early on. And maybe once you have a more mature product, then you can spend more time, maybe 20% working on your evals. But that good enough, it's really subjective. But what do you think?
Yeah, no, I big fan of Toyota. First of all, I really like their lean approach, and I agree with the Toyota thing as well. That like build a small part, make sure it's well evaluated, right, and then ship that. So don't go crazy on like having 10 sub agents and then try to ship all at once, because then you also spend a lot of time to evaluate. It's easier to know what's good enough when it's smaller, and then you iterate from there, right? If you have the process in place, then you can iterate. But another thing, like for me, the best way to get a good enough, the biggest problem that I see on the industry right now is that there is a team that build, right? And then there is a separation. There is how to say they are there are silos, right? There is the team that is building, and there are the teams that is going to use that, or the customer, or the stakeholders, right? I think, again, back to my point, as those things are getting more human, I think we need more human solutions for that as well. Bring them together, right? Take them, bring them to collaborate. Those scenarios that I'm talking about, we have a lot of customers having success having their customers in a collaborative session write those scenarios, and it can be on a Google Docs, right? It doesn't matter the format. You can take these Google Docs and convert using an agent later to proper written scenarios, right?
Yeah.
And then if those people that are the real users or the really value, the people where you're bringing the value to, if they're the ones looking at the output or the outcome that is going there and give you feedback early, and you can comply with all what they find most critical, then they will have the confidence as well. You show them the transcripts, right, of all those simulation conversation, and they'll be like, yeah, that's good enough.
So
That's something
going
that
back
I
to the
use.
whole collaborative idea, right? That it needs to be defined together. Yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. Then I think that is the last, yeah, second to last question. Open source, self-host versus friendly, commercial eval suite versus fully local scripts, pros and cons, when to use what. Yeah, you had a strong opinion on that one. What
Yeah,
do
yeah,
you
I
like?
definitely do. And let me start off with the last one, right? So local scripts, that's what we see the strongest teams do, right? So these are teams and organizations with massive complex code bases with custom prompts that have, very unique formatting. These are unique needs that these projects have. So, of course, in that sense, no out-of-the-box platform as a service or even open source framework is going to fit those unique needs. So, if you're already at a very late stage, then it's very possible that building your own scripts from scratch and just getting the bare necessities of what exactly you need is the best way to go. Now, I'd say open source is a good way to start, right? And it's a great way to set up your initial evaluation practices. But once you deploy to real-time users, so for example, we recently built an application that has over 30,000 daily users, right? Once you reach scales like that and above, then you probably want to switch to commercial eval suites that are hosted in the cloud, that scale better, that are more robust, that have better safety practices, right? Security plays a very big role in this. So I'd say that's how I would layer it, right? Local scripts for your very unique needs, open source for the early stage proof of concept, and then switch to commercial eval suites once you're already more mature and in production and have just a serious system in place.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, even though LangWatch is a platform, right? I agree with you that most advanced teams they have they are advanced on codes, right? And they will probably have more advanced evals than anyone, and very specific to them and structure and agents. But this is why, exactly since the beginning, at LangWatch, we always try to build the platform in a way that it doesn't get in your way at all.
Mhm.
So we're not prescriptive on a framework. Our framework is very low level. It doesn't tell you like this is how you should do evals, right? This is
No.
the framework that you should use. But rather, we try to be like the minimum layer possible just to help you log in. So indeed, for teams that are more advanced, I do think it makes sense and like to have their own scripts and their own pipelines. And then we don't want to get out of the way. We want to get completely out of the way and just help them throw that in the platform for bringing that collaboration side, right?
Mm.
And for other teams, there are building applications that are perhaps less complex technically, but on the other hand, more complex on, for example, the regulation. Like I said, if it's a legal application, right, where the
Yeah.
collaboration is heavier than the technical part as compared to, for example, an analytics query generating agent, right, that can be very technical.
Mhm.
Then a platform is immediately it can be more useful for them, right? And then the UX, the collaborative part there is what counts a lot. And yeah, we also believe, I mean, we are open source, and one thing that we noticed early on the self-host is that because now we're using this new software to process more and more intelligence than ever, there's also a lot of sensitive information that goes there, right? So if you're
Yeah.
using for financial records, for medical records, then you will want open source. That's why we build the LangWatch like self-hosted from the get-go.
All right, I see that we're entering our last 10 minutes. So, anybody in the audience, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll be happy to, discuss them with Rogerio. But if not, we still have one question left.
Great one. Yeah, drop the questions in the chat, and while we collect those questions, let's answer the 2026 if you want. Just go quick one, Ron.
I'm sorry, I just see Nuno dropped a very good question and a very, very sharp one in the chat. How do you convince leadership to invest in evals? And that's that's a problem I know very, very well as a consultant. And as a matter of fact, the day after tomorrow, I'm gonna go do exactly that. I'm gonna go and try to convince people to invest more money into into something that doesn't generate more revenue, unfortunately. Um, I think that, and please feel free to interject at any point, Rogerio, but there is a very clear selling point for evals, and that is the quality of iteration, right? Leadership, just like the engineers, they know that OpenAI released five new or six new major models this year. They know that Google released Gemini 3 and 2.5 and so on. And so they understand that their teams need to iterate and that we need to, it's a very fast-paced environment. So in order, like the way I like to do this is to position evaluation as a method to really iterate effectively. So
Mhm.
if they understand that this is a continuous process, that it's not one said and done. If they don't, you start by explaining that, right? You start by saying that, hey guys, AI in production is never finished, right? There's no such thing as deployment and forget about it.
No.
So you start by explaining that, and once you get that message across, you explain that in order to continuously iterate, you need to continuously measure, you need to continuously evaluate. And only based on those evaluations can you make informed decisions, because otherwise you've got the nightmare scenario, right? You've got engineers who are iterating based on gut feeling and users that are unhappy even though all of your tests are passing. So
And I think, Ron, you can make those claims a bit harder basing on numbers. It might not be clear to them how is the software lifecycle works, but I think a simple what is it, Fermi estimation, like a back of the napkin calculation, right? You can think about your current process on how is it that you're developing the agent right now. Are
mhm,
you doing manual tests, right? Sending those messages. How long does that take? Multiply that by a number, right? Of how often do you think you do that? How many times per week? How often do you have that Jira ticket that goes back and then you have to go back to the PM and ask them what's that about? And how much do you lose in this communication? Put that, like take a pencil and then estimate those. And even if, of course, it's just an estimation, the numbers are not correct, but then it might be easier to communicate like, see, here's where we lose time, this and that, and then this is the problem that we had to roll back last week. Try to factor all that in, and I think yeah, you can really prepare a strong argument for leadership in a language they will understand too.
yeah. But I think yeah, both of us are talking about a very similar thing is that identify the pain point. And you, I assume as an engineer or as a PM, you know what that pain is. And then yeah, try to describe it the best the best way you can.
Exactly, exactly.
So,
uh,
going back to our question, what do we anticipate for 2026? Rogerio, you want to go first?
Sure. I mean, what I anticipate is actually a lot of things that are also on LangWatch roadmap, coincidentally.
Okay.
Otherwise, it wouldn't be on the roadmap if I didn't anticipate. But as we already touched upon, I think 2025 was the year of agents, that people were building agents. I think 2026 will be the year where this industry matures, right? Where we have more and more companies polishing and adapting those process, the language, the words that we use, scenario simulations are going to stabilize across the industry. I think this will lead like now where was something mostly reserved for the excited AI engineers. I think now we have better tooling, we have more the role of AI PM people are
Mhm.
calling, right? So that like it's a PM that is like very well versed on that, and they do their own prompts and they do their own building. There is so many flow builders, agent builders in the market right now.
Mhm.
And then one of my also beliefs that will grow a lot in 2026 is voice agents. So voice brings a whole new level of unblocking places that already use voice, right? When you call customer support, for example, or
Yeah.
tasks that people are still doing that by hand where they don't have their hands busy, voice can play a role. And it brings a set of challenges, right? Like interruptions or bad quality or latency. Latency will be a big thing because for the text you can wait, but for the voice, not really.
Yeah.
And lastly, that I had written down here is trace intelligence. So I think so far we have been looking at those inputs, outputs one by one, right, on evaluation. Also when we are in production and then we detect that something happens. I think in 2026, we'll look more and more at things at scale. So we can look at those million of messages that your agent received this month and understand what was the drift, what was the difference in user behavior, what scenarios are not covering yet, and bring that back to make your agent more automatically, having an agent improving that agent, more automatically, be on within the guardrails.
Interesting. Yeah. I think that this year the biggest breakthrough, and I don't know, this is kind of a prediction, kind of what I want to see,
Yeah,
but
exactly. Yeah.
it's longer context agents, right? Agents who are capable of solving much longer chains of logic, who are capable of reasoning over hours and days and not just minutes or a few iterations. More importantly, I'm hoping that we're going to see a few startups, such as LangWatch, for example, pop up and really take over the infrastructure because I feel like that's where we're lacking right now severely. One
Right.
thing to understand is that all of these agentic workflows very much expand our attack surface, right? And the amount of vulnerabilities that can be found and all the
Right.
tools and all the public exposures. So we need the right infrastructure to set up to build these applications safely so that we don't have unfortunate and catastrophic incidents like data leakages and PII problems. Another thing I think will become quite big this year, but maybe this is more for model builders than model users, is
And sorry, Ron, just to mention, we have a last minute.
1 minute left. Okay, so to wrap it up, it's going to be a good year for AI. Yeah, I think chain of thought monitorability is gonna play a big role. So that's my prediction.
That's awesome. Right on time. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining. We have two QR codes on the screen for LangWatch and ADC Consultant, and we have one last question on the chat. Then maybe we can tackle it on this very last second before we turn off this stream.
Yeah.
And I'll just read it. When we look at agent skills, could we use eval scenarios to create cross-platform skills? Example, create skills for Cloud Code that we could use for Gemini or other agents. Yeah, I'll tackle that. Yeah, absolutely. We have a customer that's literally doing that. So they build a coding agent for migrating one of their old code bases or not one of the old. So it's a big company and they have a lot of legacy code in a different programming language and they want to migrate to a new one. And it's very specific to their code base, the ways of building the libraries, right? And they wanted to test that the engineers using that will be able to migrate different parts of the code well. So what they did was creating a scenario that set up all the context. That is like, I have this old code base version, I pass in this cloud skill, for example, and then what we did was behind the scenes, we actually run cloud code in from the terminal command. It fully executes, and then you judge at the end. We get all the answers back from the thinking process of Claude, so the judge can judge like any other agent, right? And then that allows them to create various scenarios. So it would, with code examples, so it would be easy for you to switch, replace Claude Code with Gemini, and then you just need to integrate. There is an agent adapter. You integrate that, you switch, and then you see if Gemini also passes the same scenarios. So it is a bit more technically challenging, of course, because we're dealing with coding agents. But yeah, it was great seeing it work. Okay, now we don't have any more time. 1 minute over. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining our webinar. It will still be available on LinkedIn and on X, on my personal X account. We're going to reshare also with you later. And thank you, Ron, for joining today and answering all those great questions.
Thanks, Rogerio. It was a pleasure. And thanks for joining everyone. And yeah, I hope we can do this again sometime.
Absolutely.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.